Good evening and welcome to a live presentation on Election Day in Ashland 2009. I'm Howard Kaplan along here with David Riley from the Metro West Daily News. Welcome and thank you for being here, David.
Thanks.
Tonight we're going to focus in a live presentation here on the three candidates for Ashland Selectmen. As you may know, two incumbent selectmen, Cassie Sammons and Phil Jack, have decided not to run for re-election. So we have three candidates here who will be talking to you this evening for two seats, so you'll have an opportunity to hear their views. Joining us tonight are newcomer John Featherston, and thanks so much for being here, John.
Well, thank you for having me.
Michael Campbell, who is joining us tonight, has also run for selectman in the past. He ran last year. Welcome back, Michael. And Randy Gruber, who is currently the chair of the Ashland Board of Zoning Appeals. Thanks, Randy, for being here. Tonight's format will be as follows. We will be giving each candidate 90 seconds to introduce themselves to you, the home viewer. Then David and I will be asking questions of the candidates one by one, and the other candidates will each have 30 seconds to rebut the answer of the person to whom we ask the question. The person that we ask the question to will have 60 seconds to respond. And we'll just keep doing this until time has elapsed, and then each candidate will have 60 seconds to reintroduce themselves to you at home. So we hope this is helpful to you. By the way, Election Day is Tuesday, May 9th here in the town, so don't forget to go and vote. By the way, also, town meeting is May 6th, so also don't forget to attend that. So without further ado, why don't we start from left to right here. John Featherston, you have 90 seconds to make your opening statement.
Well, thank you very much, and good evening, Ashland. I am John Featherston, and I currently live at 98 Heritage Avenue here in Ashland. I am a husband and lucky to be married to my wife and best friend of 17 years, a proud father of two boys, Nick and Andrew, ages 10 and 11, who attend the Mendez School here in Ashland. I've worked in corporate America as a general manager in the hospitality and the restaurant industry, and I've also been a successful regional sales manager for international wine companies in the Northeast region. I'm currently employed by a nonprofit organization working with young adults with autism. I am someone who loves Ashland. My wife and I bought our first home here in Ashland on Green Street, and then I moved away due to a job transfer and had the opportunity to come back to Massachusetts. And my wife and I both decided if we were going to come back to Massachusetts, we must return to Ashland. And we returned to Ashland for all the benefits that it offers: the community, the schools, the location, and the affordability. I've been a stay-at-home dad in the past who now balances my day job around the needs of my children and supporting my wife's successful career. And I am someone who knows and appreciates and respects the IEP process within the schools, and I am a firm believer that I need to support my schools and my entire community going forward. And that is the reason why I've decided to run for selectman. I will be a selectman who the community can reach out to, be accessible to, and someone who will listen and learn from the community and make my decisions based on the greater good of Ashland. I'm concerned that Ashland has changed and lost some of its core values, and I'm concerned about the affordability of Ashland moving forward. The citizens of Ashland need to know what is the plan to maintain the level of services currently in the town and the services that they need and pay for and deserve. I hope this gives everybody a better understanding of who I am and why I'm running for selectman. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to tonight's debate.
Thanks, John. That was John Featherston, who has just introduced himself to you. He is running for one of two seats in the Board of Selectmen here in Ashland. Our second candidate who's running is Michael Campbell. Michael, thanks for joining us, and if you wouldn't mind making your opening statement right now.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Michael Campbell. I'm honored to be a candidate here for the Board of Selectmen. Before I go on and tell you about myself, I want to thank Phil Jack and Cassie Sammons for the services they've provided for this town. They've been dedicated in the services they've provided for many years, and I just want to thank both of them for that. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here tonight. I am excited for the chance to serve this town, specifically on the Board of Selectmen. A little bit about myself. My family has lived in this town since 1976. My three brothers and I started at the Warren School and all went on through the school system and graduated from Ashland High School. I went on to earn my degree in economics from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. My career path has taken me several times to both coasts and the Midwest, and I finally have settled back here half a dozen years ago. Throughout my career, I have managed territories, offices, personnel, and budgets ranging from the tens of thousands to the tens of millions of dollars. I say this because I understand the complexities of large budgets and the necessity of proper delegation and oversight. I feel these skills transfer well to municipal management. I, as always, will challenge myself to offer sound and fair decisions and actions. I've owned a local business here for 5 years, and I am a member of the Ashland Business Association. I also have been working with the Ashland Emergency Fund for several years, and I've been sitting in with the Financial Ad Hoc Committee since its inception, meeting with and learning from almost every department head in town. I have the qualifications, drive, and experience to assist in the management of the affairs in this town, and I hope you agree, and I'm asking for your support on May 19th. Thank you very much.
Thanks. That was Michael Campbell, who is, again, running for one of 2 seats in the town of Ashland. There are 2 open seats on the Board of Selectmen. Just heard from John Featherston, Michael Campbell. Now we turn to the final candidate here, Randy Gruber from Ashland. Randy.
Good evening, Ashland. My name is Randy Gruber, and I give a lot of thought and consideration before deciding to put my name on the ballot here. I think, as you'll find through our discussions this evening over the next hour and a half, that I have the experience, skill set, and knowledge to contribute in a large way to the Board of Selectmen. And beyond my qualifications, which I hope I can prove that to you over the next 90 minutes, that what really drove me to run for this is the experience I've had in the last year and a half. It's been working with the We Love Ashland group and getting involved with the community and working on community issues. It's through this that I've met a number of people through town, a cross-section of town, that seeing as we come together, I get to feel that I'm part of the community and working in what I'll call is the true essence of community, when you get people coalesced around a certain idea. And you can start to see I've been amazed at in terms of the wealth of talent that we have in town, some real incredible people I've gotten to meet, as well as just the different viewpoints that people bring to the table and coming together to work towards something. I'm sure a number of you have heard about the Ashland Community Garden that will be starting this summer. And it's been just like uplifting and very energetic to watch that grow from a small group of folks, and how we've outreached to the garden club as well as the Friends of the Library, and really have got to a core that we're going to make it happen this coming summer in Stone Park. And what I'd like to do is to bring that type of community involvement to the Board of Selectmen. And through that, in terms of reaching out to people, making basically I'd call a chest of goodwill, that you know that the people that are sitting on the Board of Selectmen were making decisions that are right for the town. And I hope that I can earn your vote and trust, and that you'll vote for me for Selectman on May 19th.
Okay. Thank you. That was Randy Gruber. We have now heard from the 3 candidates in their opening statements running for the Board of Selectmen here in Ashland. Just to reintroduce who we are, I'm Howard Kaplan, and this is David Riley from the Metro West Daily News. And we start off with a question from David from the news. However, we also want to invite you to ask questions. If you're watching this on Tuesday night, April 28th, we are live. So we invite you to send your questions to the following email address: live, L-I-V-E, at WACA-TV, no space, .com, live at WACA-TV.com. We've already received one, and we will be asking that question shortly. But right now we want to turn to David.
Thanks. As I think all of you know, the town is facing a $2.1 million deficit next fiscal year based on the most recent projections from the town manager. And the Board of Selectmen is planning to meet in mid-May to talk about cuts and layoffs. And barring something extraordinarily unexpected, it seems pretty likely that some jobs are going to be lost. And it seems unlikely that it's going to get a heck of a lot easier in the next year. If you're elected, how specifically would you go about deciding how to make those kinds of cuts? And is there any specific place that you might look at to trim?
Is there somebody that you'd like to direct this question to? Feel free. Feel free. Or
it's really directed to all of you, so I
jump
guess we'll
ball.
start
Yeah,
with John.
whoever wants to take it, and then you can respond.
I'll take
Okay.
it. Well, the first thing that you have to do is be sensitive to the sensitive issue that it is. It's going to be cuts, and it's going to be cuts that are going to affect all lives. Unfortunately, it's going to affect the lives of the people that do get cut, and it is going to affect the services of the town. So one thing that I would like to see is you build a team and you gather good information, and then you base your decisions off that good information, and the town leaders and the chair people that hold those, and you get the good information and you go forward with that. And it's a time for leadership, and that's when leaders have to step up. And as in corporate America, you base those personnel changes and how they do affect the bottom line, and you make those decisions going forward. And it has to be a real team effort, and it requires a lot of good quality information.
Okay. Thank you, John. Michael and Randy, you have an opportunity to rebut. So either one.
I don't disagree with John. I think that part of the job of the selectmen is to meet with the town department heads and see, bit line by line on which items that they are absolutely necessary and place a value on them, and then determine where the cuts are made. It's a terrible situation that we're in with the recession in the economy. Everyone is feeling it, from private sector to public sector, and it's just a real tough thing, and everyone is going through it. And it's just a shame when it hits home like this, but we need to talk to the police, the fire, the school department, all the departments, and literally just see where we can make those line item cuts.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Randy?
I agree in terms of we need to go and make sure we get all the input from the department heads, as well as getting a sense too of all this, the community as a whole, and what services are being utilized and to what level they're being utilized. Need to factor that into it. Need to have a very open discussion as possible that we can. I've been at an internet startup for the last 9 years. I've been through hiring numbers and then the layoffs, and the layoffs are always tough. And the best thing you can do is to gather as much data, make a team-based decision on it, and then lay that out. And you have to make the tough decisions. It's not easy, but I've done that in the past, and I'm ready to step up to the plate. Doesn't mean I look forward to it, but it needs to be done, and we can make the decisions.
Sure. Thank you, all three. My first question is, on May 13th, Selectmen are going to meet, at least as of this presentation tonight. We know that they're going to be meeting on May 13th to consider layoffs and other budget measures. If you were a sitting selectman on that night, in May 13th, what would you do? And I direct this actually to, let's just say, why don't we start with Randy?
Sure. The first is I would have the budget in front of me. I've gone through that. Actually, we've talked to the department heads beforehand, really getting looked at. I'd look at, some of the things that you can push off for a while and maybe hopefully save some positions is looking at capital outlays. There's other ways that we can do maybe forego some capital outlays. Now, in saying that, we have to be careful because, if there's a new police cruiser or a new fire truck that's needed for safety concerns, we have to be appreciative of that. But do the homework, talk to the department heads. Get a sense in terms of looking at the utilization of services as well, and we're going to have to go through and get some consensus among the group. I look at that as really needing to get as much input to make that decision as possible. Once you've gathered the input, I'm ready to step up to the plate and make a decision based on the input.
But based on what you've observed, because you've been involved in Ashland government for quite some time, based on your observations, what specifically would you do?
What specifically?
Mm-hmm. If you were sitting there May 13th. Because if you gain election, you'll be there on the 21st. So.
Absolutely. Well, in terms of that, I think a lot of the, because part of that is it's a public meeting, so you can only do so much work, I guess, behind the scenes.
Sure.
But it would lay out in terms of doing as much as homework as possible, hearing what the other members of the board as well as the department,
sure.
And then we're just going to have to lay down whether it's going to be makes us sense to do a straight cut across the board.
Right.
Sometimes it's the easiest thing to do, or if we can work a little harder and figure out maybe we can make it disproportionate based on some input that we've received and what some of the needs are. Like I said, the capital expenditures is one of the things I definitely would try to push back on, because I'd rather have people here delivering the services if we can push back that capital expense. I've been hard pressed to say exact without having the hard data in front of me, because these are people's jobs that are going to depend on these decisions.
Sure. Thanks, Randy. You folks have an opportunity to rebut. John?
I agree with a lot of what Randy said. You look at the capital expenditures, and you need people to provide services in the town. So the people need to come first. It's a hypothetical question somewhat, but I think I need to let Ashland know that I would somebody that would be well prepared for that type of discussion if I had the opportunity to currently be on the board. Like I said, I've talked to all the chairs in the town, get the input, have the information done, and you know, be a good communicator with the town departments to know where and what could be cut, and have that good information and make those decisions based on that.
Mike?
Well, it depends on the department that we're looking at. I know the school department is looking at a new superintendent, and depending on who they finally decide, there's an option of saving immediately and not hiring an assistant, which I think is an important thing, and that's certainly something that I don't think is a necessity at this point in time, and it will not, and it'll save a lot of money without hurting or laying someone off if that's the case. Within every other department, you just have to look at that, and there's a lot of raises. First of all, you've got to cap the raises. We need to trim our overhead first before we lay off, and I know that's not going to cover it, but we have to come to an agreement with all the people in town that, hey, look, it's hurting. Everyone's hurting. If everyone insists on the raises that they're in their contract, then someone next to them is going to be on, and that's just something that we really need to look at.
Thank you, all three. We go back to David Riley in the Metro West Daily News.
Kind of touching on what you were just talking about, Mike, I wanted to ask you, the selectmen and the school committee control their own budgets, but certainly they have to work together to
Absolutely.
figure out how to best use the town's limited funding. And certainly the two boards have said they've been trying to work together, trying to cooperate, trying to communicate better than they might have in the past.
Absolutely.
Certainly there are still always differences of opinion once in a while, but as a selectman, how would you view your relationship with the schools, particularly when you're working on finances?
Do I interpret it in the future or in the past?
In the future, if you're elected,
I certainly think that there's a lot of room for communication there, and I would love to reach out to the school committee at first and see, because I think there's, with the situation we had last year, and anyone out there may know about it, the override last year was a very, it was an awful situation for the town, and the way it divided this town, it was a terrible thing. And a lot of people out there know what happened and the things that happened, and that was just wrong. And I would love to see everybody come together, and I'll be the first one to offer, to listen out there. I do believe that both sides really need to listen. We're not there where we need to be yet. I will certainly be willing to do that and to discuss things. There are issues, and the whole town has to come together and communicate. We need to know what people think are important in this town. And when you look at one certain department, no matter what department that is, there are people that have feelings for that. I come into this race without any specific agenda to a certain department, and I would like the whole town to come together. I think we can. It's a lot of work, but we can, and we have to. Right now, especially now. It's a terrible situation out there right now. We have to come together.
Thanks, Mike. John?
Well, David, I'm invested in the school systems. Like I mentioned earlier, I have two boys in the school system, and I've always been a strong believer in that. I talked earlier about core values. One of the core values that you can provide as a town is a good quality education, and that's one of the motivations of why I've gotten motivated to become a selectman, because I do believe there is a little bit of a divide in the community and with the boards, and I hope that I can bring the leadership and the communication skills to make that a smaller divide and increase the communication. It's the most important thing that we have in our community, and it's a big issue, and it's a motivating point behind me running for selectman.
Okay. Thank you, John. Randy?
One point in terms of just my experience working on the Zoning Board of Appeals, and actually as well as my training as a lawyer. I mean, part of what you need to do is you need to look at both sides of both viewpoints, trying to figure out where there's common ground and get people to kind of coalesce around that common ground. And part of that's trying to keep an even head, be even-handed. I think, if you look through the various decisions, and I've participated in the board, I feel it's very important to both understand the applicant as well as all of the other citizens that are impacted by any decisions before us, making sure that they're heard, making sure that we clearly communicate on terms of when we come to a decision, what's the logic behind it. And I think it's defining process and a sense of fairness that people will get. They might not all agree, perhaps, with the final decision, but my main thing is to strive that there was a fairness, a process, and I can lay that out for people, what that was, and help them bring them together. Like I said, around the common ground that usually exists. You just got to look for it.
Sure. Thank you to all three. We are actually getting questions in from our viewers, so we're going to go to those in a moment. And if you'd like to submit a question, if you're watching on Tuesday, April 28th, which is tonight, For those of you watching right now live, we are live at WACA-TV.com. The word live, L-I-V-E, at WACA-TV, no space.com. This question comes to us, folks, from Leslie, an Ashland resident. Even in this tough economy now, how could Ashland attract small businesses in Ashland? What type of businesses would you like to see come to our town? Now, presumably she's asking this because businesses bring tax revenue, and we desperately, of course, need tax revenue, no matter how you come out on the political spectrum. So just randomly, I'm going to throw this out to John, just to start.
Well, thank you, Leslie, for submitting the question, because I think it is a very important question for Ashland's future. And the best way to grow business in the town is you go and ask for it. You invite people into the community, you reach out to businesses, you develop a task force, as I know there is in town, and you openly recruit business. And I said earlier tonight, I love Ashland, and I think Ashland has a lot to benefit small business. And we can't wait for it to come to us. We need to go and find it and encourage them and welcome them. And
What specific mechanisms, just going with that and continuing along Leslie's question, what specific mechanisms, there's a redevelopment group that was recently formed. What tools would you use that are available to do that?
All networking. You contact business associations and find out, what is future growth as this economy resets itself. Sure. There's going to be opportunities for future growth. So you network, you talk to all agencies, all groups. I mean, you do it grassroots. You contact your local Rotaries and Lions clubs and so forth and so on. And like I said, you get a task force together to highlight the benefits of Ashland. And you have to, it's just like in sales. If you don't ask for the order, you don't get it. So it's also going to be that way with Ashland. You gotta ask for businesses to come here and let them know what Ashland has to offer.
Great. I'll let you folks have a crack at Leslie's question. Mike?
Sure. Thank you, Leslie. Right now, our tax base is the same. It's about 13% or close to that with residential, industrial, and commercial. I would love to see the taxes be lowered a little bit, which I think once people got wind of that, they would start to come in and fill up our empty buildings that are around town. We are currently waiting, we're in limbo for Framingham and the pipes on the Route 126 corridor to be repaired, and then we can upgrade our own to drive some traffic there. However, Route 126 is not accessible, if you will, to a lot of areas, so that's not going to bring the big businesses in. Route 135 we need to look at, and to start with, offer an incentive for businesses to come to this town. Lower the taxes temporarily, bring someone in. It's a recession, people are hurting. We need to get some more dollars into the economy, and by taxing people at the same rate that we're doing is just bringing their cash levels down, and no one can spend, and that's the way it is right now. So give people a little bit of cash incentive and they will come.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Randy?
What I would focus on is in terms of, there are a lot of very talented people here in town, and I would focus on helping them building networks and the support structure to have them start their own businesses. I think as we look forward in terms of, we're going to talk peak oil and what impacts that has on the economy as a whole, I think there's going to be more of a focus on local. And I think in terms of, I've got some existing with the Ashland business, the ABA, let's build that up, support it. I know like Arlington has a Shop Arlington First initiative, and we need to have maybe something like that here in Ashland. In terms of more and more, especially with the internet and connectivity, it's very easy for people to do things out of their homes. And you can build the support structure. And I think in terms of, especially if we have some leaders in government that have that experience, that have worked with the big Fortune 500 companies like Procter & Gamble, market research firms, as well as internet startups, which I have done all three, that we can really work with those. I understand the tax piece. I have concerns about just doing tax incentives for business, because then we just get into big competition with all the surrounding towns, and it's almost a race to the bottom. Whereas I'd really work and put focus on the people living here in town. They're already attracted to Ashland. They're here for reasons. Let's give them more reason to stay, and let's work and develop a network where we can build small local businesses.
Thank you to all three of you. Coming back to David from the Metro West Daily News.
On the subject of development, as I'm sure you're all aware, the town officials okayed an arrangement with Fafford Real Estate to make some changes to a condo project, Village of the Americas. Just as some background for viewers, the agreement would let Fafford build some more condos, and in exchange they would boost some payments that they've been making to the town, and they would build a new athletic field at the high school. But certainly at a public hearing recently, not everyone was particularly thrilled with the way it was handled. So there's sometimes a tension between development and what the residents want. If you were on the board when Fafford came to the board and asked to make these types of changes to their project, how would you have gone about handling it? And I guess we'll start with Randy.
Thanks, David. Actually, just in regards to that, I mean, I actually walked around the property, spent some time up there really just seeing what Fafford's doing. If I was on the board, quite frankly, I mean, the whole background of the deal is that was zoned industrial, and we cut this deal so that there was some guaranteed commercial to offset, you know, the residential piece there. And, you know, quite frankly, I mean, Fafford has a record of just being notorious of how he treats contractors. He's very bottom line oriented. I would have looked at it in terms of, because if you go over there, we're talking there's going to be 1,000+ people living in that. The argument that you can't have some level of mixed development there, I just don't buy into it. I would have said maybe what was on the books in terms of the commercial and the mixed pieces there, maybe that was a little bit more than it could support. I would have started negotiating that, but I would not go to what the board did in terms of just totally getting rid of the commercial piece. I mean, you look at our tax base, and we need to get whatever commercial we can, and I just find it hard-pressed, because all these people are going to be making trips away from there. I mean, I could even, looking at the economy as energy prices go up, 40% of the people that are looking for houses are looking for walkable communities. You could have a nice walkable community there with some mixed development in the front like it was initially drawn out. So I would have negotiated a lot harder on that. And the other concern I have on it too, especially with Fafford, and I understand the deal with the football field, but you know, there's got to be some blasting done there. And I mean, our school is one of the best assets we have in the town, and I just have some concerns if we're going to be letting someone like the likes of Fafford be responsible for some blasting around it. So I have some major reservations for it.
Thanks, Randy. Michael, John?
Yeah, thank you. I would have, I think the question was what would be the first thing that you do. The first thing I would do is hold a public hearing and take the input from the community. We've got a whole town that has an interest in this property, i.e. the football field that is potentially going to come. And then there's the people that live in the buildings, and they're extremely angry and completely justifiably so with the workmanship and the admitted problems with the buildings that they've got. And I think the town to just bypass that at this point and go negotiate a football field, I think should have been addressed, and I think everyone agrees on this, it should have been addressed a little bit earlier, and people should have been made available to come and talk. They did it at the public hearing a few weeks ago, and it was 100% negative, and yet it was a unanimous vote. It just didn't make a lot of sense.
Thank you, Michael. John?
Well, David, I've been very vocal and about this issue, and I'm very concerned about it. To answer the question, what would I have done for if I was on the Board of Selectmen during those negotiations? One, I would have included the community. Fafford has a reputation in the town. It's not 100% positive, to say the least, and it's a sensitive issue in the town. And you know, I think leadership needs to identify that is a sensitive subject in the town, and I believe that you have to be an inclusive government in this type of thing. I would have negotiated personally a lot tougher on Fafford. I would have expected a lot more up front from him in terms of an investment in the community, maybe something that we could have drawn down on versus an occupational payoff when he actually built the condos. I would have asked him for a very large pay-in for that. But then more importantly, going forward, is, you know, what guarantees is he going to have of building a quality structure in the community, because that's his reputation that he doesn't. And I would have put strong demands on him up front. You know, if this is something you want to go forward to, these are the standards that you must meet. And I was disappointed that we did not do that.
Thank you. You just heard from John Featherston along with Michael Campbell and Randy Gruber. These three gentlemen are running for two open seats in the town of Ashland, the Board of Selectmen. I'm Howard Kaplan, along here with David Riley from the Metro West Daily News, and we've reached the halfway point of our debate tonight. We invite you to ask questions. How do you do that? If you're watching on Tuesday, April 28th, that is a live presentation for us on that date. Please email us at live@wacatv.com, live@wacatv.com. One of the legacies, you could say, on the part of Phil Jack, who is retiring, so to speak, from the Board of Selectmen, although he's a very young gentleman, is that he was extremely active in trying to get higher payments from the state under Chapter 70 for our school system. He was, I'm not declaring my endorsement of what he did one way or the other, but objectively he was tireless in his efforts. How would you continue those efforts to increase our share of the Chapter 70 funds? Because, as you know, the share of the budget in the town of Ashland that goes towards schools is 70%. It's enormous. They are the ones that always have to make the huge cuts every year, particularly this year. So my question to you is, how would you get to the State House, get to the legislature, increase our share of Chapter 70 funding? Because it objectively is not going that well. Let's start with Mike.
Well, that certainly is very commendable, Phil, and I appreciate what he's done. We need to work with Tom and Karen, really, and that's something else that I'd like to
And that's Tom Santacandro,
absolutely.
for our viewers,
I'm sorry.
State Rep.
Tom
That's okay.
Santacandro, State Rep, and State Senator Karen Spilka.
Sure.
They've actually had great strides with this in the last years, and I don't think it's been known too much, but our per student spending is up now. We've had goals of being ahead of Holliston and Hopkinton and comparing ourselves, and we're actually now ahead of Holliston, and we're almost even with Hopkinton. It's a wonderful thing. We still need to keep the foot on the gas, though. The next year, the budget, we don't know what's going to happen to it, and it's an awful thing that the schools are facing. Bus fees for kids, that's a terrible situation. I went to school here. To thought of having my parents pay for bus fee when I was growing up here, I couldn't imagine. We need to stay on that, and I'd like to meet with Phil and take the reins and run with where he started. He's done a great job there.
Thanks, Mike. Randy, John?
Would you like to go?
Go.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, and Phil should be commended on that, and Karen and Tom also for that. But specifically to answer the question, there's a lot of good things going on in the community right now. The Stand for Children organization should be commended for taking a stand and doing that. I encourage all residents to get involved in that, even if you don't have kids in the school. It does affect your tax bill. So I encourage everybody to get involved with that. Specifically, what would I do? I would still work with Tom and Karen and still pick away at them. But more importantly, I'm the type of guy, Mr. Deval Patrick. My name is John Featherston. Can we talk? And just keep doing that and go to Beacon Hill and be heard and be known. Oh, there's that guy from Ashland again. Because that's what you're going to do. The squeaky wheel is going to get the attention, and we need to do it because we are not getting the level funding, and I will be that person that will go to Beacon Hill constantly and ask for it.
Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you, Mike. Randy.
I agree with John in terms of the Stand for Children organization. I actually am a member of that. I do not have any children in the Ashland schools, but I'm a big supporter of public school systems. My sister actually is a third grade teacher back in Pennsylvania. My mother-in-law taught for 30 years in Ohio. Specifically in regards to work with us, definitely we will work with, or I will work in terms of with Tom Santacandro and Karen Spilka to get this moving. But I think we need to look too in that the issue with this in the Chapter 70 funding is that each community has their own stake in it. And we really need to probably build a coalition to work with that. And that's what I would work with both Karen and Tom on doing is, what are other communities that we can reach to across the state? Because what happens is, if you have all these different communities that are all trying to grab their piece of pie, what ends up happening is you get some progress. Actually the only way we have been able to make progress is by throwing more money at it so that you could compensate some of those communities that weren't up to par. But whereas the communities that were overpaid actually, didn't lose anything. And so we need to reach out, I think, to some different towns around the state to build a coalition to make something that really can effectively get that changed, and be more than happy to work with Tom and Karen on that.
Okay. Thank you to all three of you. David, we go to you.
Jumping back to Governor Patrick, he's proposed giving municipalities the local option of deciding whether they want to charge a 1% tax on meals and hotels. And it's not something that seems to have gained traction yet, but it's something that a lot of towns and cities have expressed support for. And I'm interested in whether that's something that that all of you would support as a selectman. I guess I'll start with John.
Well, that's an interesting question and a little bit of a difficult question because a lot of that tax is based on hotel occupancy, and we don't have a lot of that in town. Is it a good idea and an effective idea to raise revenue? I don't disagree with it. To specifically say that I would support it or not support it, I'd have to see more of the fine details on it. But it is a good thing to look at going forward.
For that question, I would certainly talk to people in the restaurant industry, and from what I understand, they're very much against it. And the feeling is that it would reduce the amount of times and money that people spend in their businesses. And as far as a raising tax and hurting business, no, I would not be inclined to support that. I would rather see the money stay and get spent and increase the economy and a little stimulation versus taxing and having people think, oh, just another tax, I don't have any more money to spend. I think we're overtaxed as it is.
Thank you. Randy?
Yeah, I'd want to go and talk to some of the local restaurant owners and get their perspective on it. On the face of it, I think it's a good idea. If I look at what their current budget situation, I mean, we need every dollar we can possibly get. And this seems to be limited avenues right now to do it. It sounds attractive. But I'd want to talk to some of the local restaurant owners and get their perspective on it and just really understand, is it going to have a drastic impact on their business? Because that would influence my decision on it.
Okay. Thank you to all three of you. We are receiving questions from you, the audience. If you're watching Tuesday night, April 28th, we are live, and the email address is live@WACA-TV.com. We have a question from John concerning the Community Preservation Act, and this was something that was passed a few years ago here in Ashland, and it involves kind of complicated, but the bottom line is that there is a property tax surcharge on property taxes here in Ashland that is matched by the state. And recently there have been news articles stating in the Metro West Daily News and elsewhere that the state is not able to match dollar for dollar those surcharges from Ashland and from all towns. There was a one-to-one match, and that is now going down to possibly as low as 35% eventually. I'll leave it to you to explain a little bit more about the Community Preservation Act, but we have a question from John. Is it time to kill it and use any monies that we obtain from that for other purposes, or continue it? And why don't we start with Randy?
Okay. In general, I like the idea behind the Community Preservation Act. I think if you've looked at what we've done with some of those monies in terms of purchasing open space as well as being able in the recreation thing, we've done a lot of good things in town. And it's really additional money we're bringing into town given the state match. But of course now the question is, now it's at 1 for 1, it's at 35%. I would still view that as something that's worthwhile, and I would support continuing with the CPA funds, because part of that is, it goes and funds things that people find really make community. I know part of the funding went for the community gardens that we're going to be starting in Stone Park. And those are the type of things, if you look behind the act, that's kind of the intent, is to support these type of things that can bring people together that really form the essence of community. And I would still support it. Disappointed that it's not the 1-for-1 match anymore, but I'd still say it's 35% return. Just by doing that, I would still totally support it.
Sure. I just want to clarify that right now it looks like it's 75%, but that there are some forecasts that it might go to 35%. So I just want to clarify. I don't want to have anyone fearful about that. We're going to lose most of the matching. It's still about 75%. Michael, John.
My understanding was that they're trying to get it to be fixed at 75%, but it was down as low as 29% as of the last Selectmens meeting.
Right.
So
okay.
Just to
okay.
clarify
Sure.
that.
Go ahead.
Community Preservation Act is a very interesting topic. I think it's a wonderful idea. It's a 3% added tax on our property taxes, and for what we've used it for, been tremendous. The library, the town hall, and other buildings in town. I think in this economy right now, we do need a lot more scrutiny on it, and I think that we need to look at things right now that if we wouldn't spend it in the operational budget, it is tax dollars. Should we spend that money just because it's coming out of CPA? We need the CPA money right now. We can't get rid of it, or at least what we've got, because we need to pay off that bond for the land that we had issues with years ago. A whole nother issue. So that is paying off the bond. So, but as far as ongoing, I do think we need a little more scrutiny with the CPA budget, because it is coming out of people's pockets. And again, I think that sometimes I question if this was in the operational budget, would we spend it or would we not? And for instance, the community garden, I think that's a wonderful idea, community garden. I supported it at the meeting. $15,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money. What I would suggest, and people get together in communities like this, is to have the garden club match it. You know, hey, well, I'll throw in some if you throw in some. Just not pay for things like that. We just need to scrutinize it a little bit more. That's how I feel.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Randy. John?
I agree that it's been a very good thing for Ashland, and it's provided Ashland with some opportunities that we wouldn't have had. And right now, it is still a good return on investment. But I agree that it's something that we need to continue to look at, pay off our debt, and address it, a year from now and see what the match really is, and then base those decisions off. But I agree with Michael. Would these be expenditures that we would be making if we didn't have the CPA funds? But going forward, we really have to look at it on a year-to-year basis.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure we have our viewers' questions covered here before we go back to David. We just got a question from Andrea. And by the way, thank you to John, who asked about the Community Preservation Act. Thank you. Andrea asks, does anyone have any ideas on how to help the food pantry and emergency fund here in Ashland? More people in town are needing these services. Do you have any ideas on how helping this with local aid might be possible? And let's just start with John.
Knowledge is power with this type of subject. The more that we as future selectmen can make it vocal to the public, get it out there, support the food pantry, increase the awareness of what the needs and demands of the food pantry are, do more fundraising for them, get the community involved. You have to ask the community to step up on issues like this, and I think it's important, and it's a good platform for the selectmen to provide that to the town and to support an organization like that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, John. Michael?
I think the food pantry, working with the emergency fund, is a wonderful organization or situation for a lot of people that need it in town. We're working with our networking group that I belong to in terms of helping. I do think it comes from the people, not necessarily the municipality, and I think everybody, as long as they're made aware of it. At Ashland Day, there's a booth. You get guys like me walking around with a tin can, donate. Every little bit helps. The emergency fund supports the pantry. When you're shopping at Shaw's, you can consider the coupons that they have, and they will match and make donations as well. Think about things like that when you're purchasing. Maybe a coupon, hey, I'll spend an extra 50 cents on something, but they're going to donate to the food pantry. Maybe it's a worthwhile cause, and that comes from the people.
Thank you. Randy?
I agree. In terms of as the Board of Selectmen, one of the primary things we can do is just to advertise, get the word out, make it aware. Volunteer some of our times at events that can be fundraisers to get that. I work with the Scout troops and Girl Scout troops to provide some of that. I mean, especially at this point in time, because a number of people out there are really hurting, and I think as a community we need to come together and support that. And that's one of the things you can use the bully pulpit, if you will, is to get the message out and encourage people to come out and support their neighbors.
Okay, thank you. One more question from our viewers. This comes from Bill, and we'll direct this to John. What municipal and professional experience qualifies you to be an Ashland selectman? And this comes from Bill, a viewer.
Well, thanks, Bill, and I appreciate the question. One is my love of Ashland is the way I would first address that question. The second thing I would tell you is that in the military and in corporate America, I've been a team leader and I believe that leadership comes through communication. And like I said, it's team building. As being a selectman, you're one of 5, so your ability to work with a board with differing opinions is a vital way to get the Board of Selectmen to be effective. I have a vast experience in corporate America with multi-million-dollar budgets. I've also had the opportunity to negotiate contracts from both sides of the table with union negotiations, being a Teamster as a liquor and wine salesman, and then being on management. I've been able to negotiate those contracts. But most importantly, my communication style and team building is what I think can help me be an effective selectman.
Thank you, John. Michael?
My experience, I've worked both in team environments and independently. I run my own business. I belong to several groups and boards that I for my business, and I have for years in other businesses that I've been with. I can work in a team environment. I can work independently. I think the team environment that the Selectmen offers suits me because I've worked with several boards in town, and I'm stumbling all of this a bit. I'm not afraid necessarily to challenge the status quo, and I'm okay with that. And what I'd like to see is a little bit more debates, whether it's debate is a healthy thing, and I'd like to see a little bit more of that, and not see every decision in town be unanimous, 5-0, 7-0. It just, we need a little bit more debate and voice from the people.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Randy?
Well, obviously, I've served on the Zoning Board of Appeals for just over 3 years now. And in doing that, I've gotten to know a number of the employees of the town, as well as some of the town itself and the cases that come before me. Understand the importance of process. There are a couple of decisions, actually, that I've kind of remanded back to the Board of Selectmen because I haven't followed process. So I'm a big fan of process. I guess that's apart from a legal background, too. That you believe that they're there for reasons, and to follow that's important. In regards to even just from more of the private sector, like I said, I've worked for a small internet startup, and I've basically negotiated a number of contracts. I mean, that's a big piece that I see that the Board of Selectmen do. That's a way I can contribute there. And actually now I'm also transitioning to working with the National Council of Aging. It's a really neat concept of trying to provide an online program for healthcare that really empowers people to manage their own healthcare. And it's being run as a social enterprise, which basically means that we are looking to take money in, but any margin we make on the business gets pushed back out into the business so that it can serve more people. And I really like that concept of mixing the kind of nonprofit with the business motive.
Okay, thank you. David?
There's a lot of talk as municipal budgets shrink about regionalization. It's something that the town certainly has tried to explore. They approached Southborough about sharing a building inspector. Southborough turned them down. The town has also been in talks with Hopkinton about trying to consolidate some fire services because of a big development over the town line in Hopkinton. And I'll direct this to Michael. Are there particular areas where you think the town might be able to regionalize services? Are there particular towns you would look to try to share services, places that maybe the town hasn't looked yet?
I don't know that I would recommend a place that the town hasn't looked yet, because I don't know every place that we have looked. But I do believe that we're looking at it in terms of the fire department, which ambulance service is big, and the fire department needs that. We definitely have the calls, and that's public safety. Public safety is number one. Police, I think we have interdepartmental teams that will help out when necessary. We've had some other issues in town where other departments have come and helped. I'd like to, with the schools, I think we could regionalize some buying situations. Buying of paper, we had an issue with that last year, buying of materials and supplies and things like that. I'd like to know more about that and know where we're doing. I don't think there's a place in this town that we shouldn't try to regionalize and benefit from quantities, discounts, and buying power that you get from doing that. So I think, and in a lot of cases we are already, but just expand that. That's a great avenue that we can do to save a lot of money.
Thank you.
I think regionalization is essential for Ashland's future. To keep Ashland an affordable town, we need to look at regionalizing as many things as we possibly can, and go back to the people that have said no to us and don't, first time you get told no, ask again. And what can we do? But I think regionalization of services is essential for Ashland at this point.
Thank you. Randy.
Yeah. Having grown up in Pennsylvania and spent a number of years in Ohio, you can just see that the bodies of government tend to be larger and have a different economies of scale. So regionalization on the face of it makes a lot of sense. But the number one issue is that you've got to get two towns that want to work together. Obviously, we should be looking at some of the surrounding towns as candidates. I think once we get that in terms of, these economic times might facilitate that, then we need to really work the details of, how are the finances split up? How is the time of an employee or the service? How's that structured so it's shared equitably? And those are some of the things that we can take lessons from corporate America and how they basically do cross-charging and some of the systems they have in place to allocate scarce resources across some of the different organizations. So some experience I have and can bring to the table and hopefully those discussions.
Thank you. We actually have time for a number of questions, and we want to hear from you at live@WACA-TV.com if you're watching this on Tuesday, April 28th. Recently, John Petrin, our town manager, strongly urged the present Board of Selectmen not to dip into our reserve account to try to balance this year's budget. He said, and I'm loosely quoting here, that we need this in case down the line things are really dire. Well, it appears things are kind of dire right now. If you were sitting in the Selectmen's seat in May, late May, early June, would you dip into the town's reserves? Anyone?
I'll take that one. Before I would say dip into it now, I know all the talk is about 2010 and how awful a year and how tough a year that's going to be for everybody. What I would like to see and get a little more familiar with is the 5-year plan. And I know it cannot be exact, and I know that we're still waiting for some state numbers to come down before everything is finalized. But we need to have a 5-year plan and know or have a good idea on where we're going to be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road. And before we dip into that fund, we need to save that for possibly the worst year. And if this year we're down 2.1 million and next year we could be down more than that, we need to save some of it. So you need to have all the facts before you make that decision.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Either Randy, John?
I could take that. Howard, you've been asking candidates for years, why do we find ourselves year after year in this situation? And the question is, why do we find ourselves in this situation? And to answer the question specifically, would I dip into those funds this year? No. And specifically why? I don't think anybody, the leading economist or anybody, knows where our economy is right now. And it needs a chance to settle and reset itself. We're going to have to make some tough decisions this year. And it's going to take some good leadership to do that. But I don't think we've reached the bottom yet, so let's not dip into those reserves at this time.
Randy?
I'd like to see some more of the data. Now, I do know in terms of just from government revenues, both in the state and the local level, there tends to be even a 12 to 24 month lag, even when things start to pick up, that you don't really start seeing the revenue come in, given the nature of how that revenue is collected, in terms of people buying new cars and so forth. So, the inclination would be is that, this is not the worst year yet. And I'd be really hesitant to say tap into that now, because it seems like we're going to need it for next year and the year after. I'd want to analyze it a little bit more, but my initial inclination would be to probably not this year, because I think we're going to need it for the next 2 years.
Okay, thank you. We actually have time for one more question, and I'm going to go to our viewer, Andrea, who I believe asked a previous question, but that's okay. She can get in a second question. Bottom line of her question is, how carefully would you look at raises of all town employees as selectmen? She notes that our town manager, John Petrin, recently received an increase, but many other town employees agreed not to take one because the budget is tight. How closely would you review the raises?
I would ask at this time that, as I said before, as the economy resets, and to let people know that we are sensitive to it, but there isn't money this year, and we need to renegotiate raises for this coming year. I mean, part of being in a community is making sacrifices for the greater good of the community. And this is a time, unprecedented time, to do it. And you know, is it better to have a job than not have a raise at this point? So I would look at all raises going forward for this year.
And I would add a degree of difficulty to that question, because it's kind of an easy question.
Sure.
How closely would you look at raises? Very closely. But I would add a degree of difficulty not mentioned in this question is that, of course, in municipal government, collective bargaining agreements actually mandate a certain percentage of raises each year. So having said that, do you want to amend your answer?
You know, it's time for leadership to negotiate those with the unions, and I as I alluded to earlier, I am familiar with collective bargaining, but you have to stimulate the conversation, and I believe it's bad leadership if you don't.
Right. Michael?
I agree with John. You look at raises very closely, and in a time like this, I think anywhere you can cap them. I think with all of the people out there that are losing jobs and how it's affecting the economy and, you know, everything like that, taxes are still going up. People have to be able to pay their bills, but to cap yourself and say, I'm going to live at the same level I did last year, there's a lot of people, I think a majority of people would say, I would love that. And municipalities have a tendency to, you know, everything's guaranteed and maintained, and with negotiating with the union's the same thing. There's got to be some sort of a clause in there that says if you can't afford it. And right now, if you accept a raise, there's going to be more people that are going to lose their jobs, and that's just a simple fact. And to do it.
Thanks, Michael. We're running a little shorter time. Randy?
Quickly, obviously, we scrutinize as much as we can. You know, I'd actually encourage your leaders and people at, you know, at the top that, you know, consider, can you really maybe forfeit that raise and maybe give it so that you can maybe give it back to some of the other employees. In regards to dealing with the unions, I mean, you know, that's a tough nut to crack. You got to look for maybe some common ground. Is there something that you could do so they get something out of it? I mean, you know, it's almost a no-win proposition if you're telling them just no to give up your raises. So we'd really have to talk with them, see if we can find some common ground to maybe make an amendment to that contract.
Thanks so much. We have now reached the conclusion of the Q&A portion of this debate. We want to actually allow our three candidates for selectmen to reintroduce themselves to the home viewer, you. We'll start with Randy. We started with John before. Let's start with Randy. You have 60 seconds.
60 seconds.
For closing.
Again, Randy Gruber, running for selectman. I hope during tonight's conversation that you got a feel for my qualifications for the position. And again, you know, the emphasis on and the importance of building community and reaching out and making people a part of the government. I know where a lot of us are really busy, and a lot of you out there are really busy. But I encourage you in terms of to get involved, you get something out of it in terms of just this whole experience I've had with the community garden and getting to really know a cross-section of town. It's been a positive thing, and it's energized me. And looking forward, I mean, we want to build Ashland as a place that people are happy to be here, proud to be a citizen of Ashland, and a place that people want to move to and bring their businesses to. And you know, I will bring my experience and will work my hardest if I have your support and vote on May 19th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Randy Gruber, candidate for selectman. We turn now to Michael Campbell.
Thank you again for giving me the chance to speak tonight, and also thank you to everyone who supported me over the last several months with their thoughts and concerns. In the coming years, there are a lot of major factors facing Ashland. The economy, changes in state aid, how it's going to affect our police department, our fire department, our schools, our senior citizens who are struggling. We need to focus on commercial growth. We need to focus on expansion of our water sources, our town's infrastructure, and bring the economy back. All these issues are critical, and I'm willing to listen and assist as we make these choices. Leadership is about making decisions, delegating responsibility, balancing the needs of all of the residents of Ashland. I feel a strong obligation to my town, and I feel I believe in my abilities to aid in its leadership. If you have any comments or questions from me, please forward them to mcamp142@hotmail.com. I really do want to hear what you have to say, and I look forward for the opportunity to serve you. Okay. Remember, mcamp142@hotmail.com. Please vote on May 19th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You just heard from Michael Campbell. John Featherston, your opportunity.
Thank you. And thank you, Ashland, for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. I hope the residents of Ashland have learned this evening that I will be a selectman who will listen and learn from the community and base my decisions on the greater good of Ashland. Please know that I am concerned about keeping Ashland affordable and keeping it the very special place that I feel that it is. I strongly believe as citizens right now, we cannot absorb more taxes and fees at this time, and it's time to get Ashland on a plan for the future. Not what I perceive as the current plan of survival, but a plan that will lead us to a stronger and more affordable Ashland. We must look at continuing to regionalize services, renegotiate contracts, and examine if the money we are spending is the right spending. We need to have a plan to maintain and enhance Ashland's core values and principles while ensuring the education and safety of all of its residents in a thriving community. Please feel free, and I encourage you to, reach out to me at johnfeatherston.com, or the best way to contact me is at 508-816-6674. I am John Featherston, and I'm asking you to please vote for me on Tuesday, May 19th for the Board of Selectmen. Thank you.
And thank you, gentlemen. Again, John Featherston, Michael Campbell, and Randy Gruber, all running for 2 open seats. A reminder, Cassie Salmons and Phil Jack are retiring from the Board of Selectmen, with these 3 gentlemen are running. So conceivably 2 of these 3 will become your next selectmen in the town. So don't forget to vote Tuesday, May 19th. Also, don't forget to go to town meeting May 6th. I want to thank David Riley from the Metro West Daily News. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. I'm Howard Kaplan. Thanks, take care, and don't forget to vote. Bye-bye.